Eagles Entertainment.
With the 10th pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and it's time to get you ready for Rivalry Week here in college football. And I've got two people on the show to help me do exactly that. We're going to start things off with Saturday Scouting, where myself, Ben Fennell, we're going to get you ready for this week in college football. We've got matchups. We've got who can help themselves the most in one of the biggest weeks of the regular season. And we've got a mock draft to break down. But first, before we get there, we are going to break down a bunch of the new names that have come across the timeline here from a all-star game acceptance standpoint. So the top names that are confirmed for the Shrine Bowl, some new announcements here for the Senior Bowl. We'll be breaking that down with Ben right at the top of the show. Then we're going to get into the rest of this college football slate with Ross Tucker, Pick 6. He and I are tied up at this point in the season with our weekly pick segment. We're going to see who could take the lead this week with this great slate of games in college football right at the end of the show. Now, again, before we get things rolling, the number one way for you to help us out is to go on to Apple Podcasts. Make sure you leave us a rating, leave us a comment. If you've got a question, a mock draft, player rankings you want us to break down, whatever it is, we will do it. But the best way to place that is to go on to Apple Podcasts and leave it there in the comment box. Not only do we help you, but it also helps us promote the show, boosts us up the rankings for other people that are looking for NFL draft podcasts. Really appreciate everybody that has thrown us your support here this season, especially over these last few weeks as more and more people are starting to get more interested in the NFL draft. That said, let's get going. I'm excited to start talking through some of the matchups for this week. But number one, these all-star game announcements, we're going to do that right here in Saturday Scouting.
It's time for Saturday Scouting.
All right, let's get into some Saturday Scouting here as I welcome in Ben Fennell. And Ben, as we've started these last couple of segments here over the last couple of episodes, we're going to do all-star game announcements. And we've got some Shrine Bowl names to go through as they've made official a handful of names over these last few days. We'll start with Indiana wide receiver Ty Freifogel. This is a guy that you actually put me onto last year, I remember, as Indiana was really heating up in the Big Ten. What does Freifogel bring to the NFL?
Yeah, Freifogel, a fifth-year senior there at Indiana, played opposite of Whop Phillier for a lot of those years at Indiana. But he's a guy with good size at 6'2", 215, maybe even 220 by the time draft time. Incredible catches at the catch point. He's competitive. He's really tough, has strong hands, a bunch of one-handed grabs. Watch any of his Ohio State tape against some top-flight corners. The big issue is, does he have enough speed and separation to survive in the NFL? Kind of a catch point guy. Typically, those 50-50 balls, not as high percentage in the NFL. So Ty Freifogel, we want to see if he's got the speed and the separation to survive on Sundays.
An offensive lineman, I want to make sure we hit on Kellen Diesch from Arizona State. He is a PFF darling. I haven't done a super deep dive yet on Kellen Diesch, but I know he was one of their top offensive linemen coming into the year. He's been very productive by a lot of their metrics in terms of pressures allowed and win rate and a lot of those things that they put a lot of stock in. And he is a guy that has been very high on their board really throughout the course of his career. And this is a guy that's played plenty of football out there in the desert for Herm Edwards. A couple of Arizona State kids we will hit on here. But before we get to the other Sun Devil that was announced, let's get into the trenches on the defensive side of the football. Taylon Humphrey from Arkansas State, a defensive tackle that, Ben, this is a kid that, when you look at his athletic traits, very, very intriguing. He was on the freak list this past season with Bruce Feldman. This is a guy that's got an outstanding wingspan, and the movement skills are absolutely there. Really, really impressive player. And then another guy, I kind of teased him earlier, Jack Jones, the corner from Arizona State. We talked about him last week here on the show with Eric Galko. Well, Shrine Bowl announced him as an acceptance here this week.
Yeah, Taylon Humphrey, don't forget, he's from Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns down there.
Yes, good call.
Not Arkansas State,
not Arkansas State.
Although similar colors and logos and stuff like that. But Louisiana, really good players on both sides of the ball. We talked about some of their offensive linemen, Osiris Torrance, Max Mitchell. We had talked about heading to the Senior Bowl. Taylon Humphrey, Zion Hill on that defensive line, really fun players. But Taylon Humphrey, 6'5", nearly 340, nose tackle, run plugger, but he can get up the field and collapse some pockets too. Plays a ton of snaps for being nearly 340 pounds, rarely comes off the field, JUCO transfer initially at Florida International. He's a guy that reminds me a lot of like a Jordan Phillips, or maybe even like a Kwame Gathers is like a throwback name. Just massive nose tackles. He's a huge body.
Yeah, and conversely, Jack Jones from Arizona State, the corner, kind of reminds me of Pac-Man Jones when he was coming out of West Virginia. Now, Pac-Man was a top 10, top 15 pick. Jack Jones not going to be in that discussion, but I think when you look at what Pac-Man Jones turned into in the NFL as kind of a really quick, undersized corner with also some special teams chops as well to be able to return punts, I think Jack Jones has that kind of skill set. Let's bounce this back to you for another corner here. Jacoby Durant, South Carolina State, one of the top players in the MEAC coming out here this year. South Carolina State, a really nice pipeline to the NFL.
Yeah, they've been pumping out pros each year, whether it's our own Javon Hargrave, whether it's Darius Leonard, who took a huge contract this past year at Indianapolis Colts. Jacoby Durant, a little undersized at 5'11", maybe 175, 180, but he's a ball hawk and he's feisty and he's a good tackler, 4-year starter. I think he had 4 interceptions in the spring ball. Remember, FCS played last spring. One of those games, he had 3 interceptions in 1.5. Huge freshman year. Yep. Showed up, played Clemson this year, Fran. He showed up. What, do you have 2 interceptions that day, if I'm not mistaken? He was a guy that was a first-team All-American last year in the HBCU. He's a guy that's lived up to it every year despite the high expectations. Quarterbacks keep throwing at him, and he keeps breaking up passes out there. So love to see him take that All-Star game invite, and let's see against some more Power 5 FBS players.
Yeah, he's a really interesting player. And I think you can say the same thing about Darrell Baker from Georgia Southern. Different body type. He's 6 foot, right around 200 pounds. He was a good sized corner, 6'1", 6 foot. And he's got traits. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list as well. Can jump out of the gym, ran low 4.4. So traits are absolutely there. What I love about him from a profile standpoint as well is that he began his career as a nickel safety. That was where he spent most of his career, just these last 2 seasons playing outside at corner. I'd like to see him get a little bit better against the run. I don't think he's great getting off blocks. He's not great at finishing tackles right now. But I think when you look at his skill set, there's no reason to think that this guy can't come in and be a core special teamer. He's done a little bit of that over the course of his career. He's been a starter on multiple units for multiple years down there for Georgia Southern, who consistently puts impressive athletes into the NFL coming from that recruiting base. And I think when you look at Darrell Baker, no reason he can't. It was funny. I was thinking of a current Eagle in Andre Sacheret, who's got that versatility on the back end of the Eagles roster. When you look at Baker, he could be that kind of player who outstanding gunner, has the ability he's got that skill set at that length, that speed. That's something to look at there with Darrell Baker, someone to project here moving forward. And then we got one more corner, Kalen Barnes from Baylor. I know nothing about Kalen Barnes, Ben. School me up here.
So he's a guy that's been playing out at cornerback for Baylor for nearly 3 years. He's been on the field for almost 4 years, his entire time at Baylor. Sometimes these young kids that get on the field right away, come at the expense of special teams contributions. He's one of those guys that really hasn't done a lot on special teams, but he's been on the field a whole bunch for the Baylor Bears. He's a guy with good ball skills, got 3 interceptions, 10 PBUs in his career. A little undersized, about 185 or so. Can get bumped around in the route against some bigger receivers. If I'm not mistaken, I think Colin Johnson might have beat him above the rim a couple times there in some of those Baylor Texas.
As Colin Johnson did.
Yep, and that's what he does out there. And, just being an experienced guy in the Big 12 out there, he's a feisty guy. Reminds me a little bit of maybe Kevin Peterson that came out of Oklahoma State a couple years ago. Okay. But he's an experienced guy, and we'll see if he's got some tools to survive in the NFL.
All right, well, let's get to the safety spot. 2 safeties to hit on here before we get to the Senior Bowl. Marquise Bell from Florida A&M. He's a really physically imposing kid. And it's the guy that we've broken down here on the show in the past. 6'3", 205 pounds. I actually compared him to Jaquiski Tartt when Jaquiski was coming out of Samford. I think they have very, very similar body types. When you look at Bell, he was a former big-time recruit. He was a 4-star athlete recruit out of Jersey. Ended up going to Maryland. Didn't work out at Maryland. He transferred after 1 year. Goes to junior college. Ends up at Florida A&M and has been a starter the last couple of years. When you look at him, good athlete, long strider, striker on contact, really consistent tackler, good blitzer. He navigates traffic well. He can play through contact. That's the big difference between him and Tartt, is that when Tartt was coming out, I remember studying him, I think it was 2012, 2013. Tartt was kind of all over the place, but he was a big height, weight, speed safety. They were very, very similar body type. I think Bell's a better football player right now than Tartt was when he was coming out of Samford. He was at the Senior Bowl that year. I think when you look at what this kid can be, he can be a starting safety in the NFL. And I think when you look at that skill set, this is a guy that can do a lot on the back end of a defense, kind of a low school Xavier McKinney, like something in that kind of mold as well. If you want to throw that around, I think he's got that level of positional versatility. Ben, take us home here with another Louisiana product. We talked about Taylon Humphrey earlier. Percy Butler from Louisiana.
Yeah, about 6 foot, 190, 3-year starter for the Louisiana Raging Cajuns out there. He can come down in the box and be a really good run defender, but he's a safety with coverage skills on the back end. He's a guy that plays the ball extremely well in the air. He's got good toughness. He can play out in space and really defend the slot. Special teams contributor. I think that type of profile, just being experienced, good size, run defender, ball skills, special teams. Playing at Louisiana, accept the All-Star game, play against some better competition out there. Let's see if maybe have some more natural coverage skills and can convert to a maybe like a Demarius Randall type of player, a guy that was a safety. He realized he could cover down at the Senior Bowl. Next thing you know, he's a first-round pick to the Packers, and he's playing corner. Percy Butler may be that type of player.
Interesting. I know. Some people are really, really high on Butler and what he can be. Let's now get over to the Senior Bowl. A bunch of other names that have been announced since we last have broken down these players. We did the offense on this show last week. We did the defense early this week on Monday. Now let's talk about some of these. I got to come to you first. You just did Percy Butler, but I feel like I need to come to you for Abram Smith from Baylor, running back. This is one of your guys for sure.
Yeah, there's a hell of a tandem down there at Baylor. Running back Tristan Ebner in a little bit of a different package, more of a pass-catching running back out there. But Abram Smith, he's about 5'11", 225, absolute bruiser, tough to take down, good short yardage back. I think he's up to 12 or 13 touchdowns this year. But the funny thing is, he played linebacker last year. They were in a pinch of linebacker. All of a sudden, he converted to the other side of the ball. Looked pretty good doing it.
Love it.
Flipped back over to the offensive side this year, and it's been really productive. They have some good guard center combos in front of him as well. Those Baylor Bears playing really good football this year. There's competitive NFL prospects on both sides of the ball. But Abram Smith, one of the darlings at the running back position with really good size.
Yeah, Matt Rule and that staff did a great job of kind of stocking the cupboard, and Dave Aranda has just kept that train rolling from a recruiting standpoint and development standpoint.
And really quick, Fran, if you just look across Sundays and some of the best running backs across the NFL, they're all 220, 225, whether it's obviously the freak show Derrick Henrys, but, you have Joe Mixons and Dalvin Cooks of the world. And these guys have good. Jonathan Taylor's 225 off his 5-touchdown game. These guys with good size are typically the ones that survive in the NFL for the most part. Obviously, we all want our gadgety backs and our scat backs on third down, but first and second down, running the ball, you better have size. And there aren't a whole lot that come out of Saturdays anymore that are in that 220, 230 kind of range.
No, it's a good call on your part for sure. Let's get to the wide receiver position. Jahan Dotson, the big news on Tuesday evening from the Senior Bowl. Star receiver from Penn State, and one of the best receivers in the Big Ten. This guy catches everything. I broke him down after I studied him a couple weeks ago. He catches everything thrown his direction. I've talked with some people who've compared him kind of like a Diet Coke version of a Devontae Smith. I don't think he's quite as crafty as Devontae, not as good off the line or as a route runner. He's got chops there, but I don't think it's quite to the level of Devontae Smith, obviously. But I think when you look at Dotson and that skill set, he could be that kind of player. He could take the top off. He can be a threat at all three levels. But I just love him at the catch point. He never lets the ball hit the ground. Another speed threat, Khalil Shakir from Boise State, also going to Mobile.
Yeah, he's really in a similar package to Jahan Dotson. Just a little, thin frame guy, but a 3-level receiver. And what I mean by that is he could win quick game, yards after catch, and just being creative with the ball, win with the route in the intermediate section. And then he could take the top off with his speed and win vertically. He's a good returner. They would give him a ton of rushing attempts as well. A lot of wildcat quarterback stuff, end arounds, jet sweeps. You just want to get the ball in his hands. Unfortunately, as he was featured a little bit more this year in that Boise offense, got a lot more targets. He's up to 106 targets this year, Fran. Yeah. He's now into double-digit drops.
Yep.
So he's a guy that occasionally gets bumped in the route, bumped at the catch point, not a big frame, a couple of concentration drops. Want to see how natural his hands are. And typically down at these all-star games, you get a really good profile if they have natural hands or if they're fighting the ball just a little bit.
That's a good call. Looking at the tight end spot, I feel like they got to be close to their limit now on the tight ends because we went through a bunch of them last week. We've got 4 more today. Trey McBride from Colorado State. We were talking about him a few weeks ago. He was like everybody. He was the chic tight end 1 for a lot of people. When you look around, I mean, Mel Kiper had him as number 1 tight end. A bunch of other analysts have had him as the top tight end. A combo player. He can block. He can catch. Not dynamic as an athlete, but this is a guy that can do a little bit of everything for an offense. So tight end Trey McBride, Colorado State, heading down there. And then you have like kind of a specialized player in Connor Hayward from Michigan State, a guy I know you've studied as well.
This guy's a lot of fun. He converted from running back to tight end this year. Obviously, they brought in a couple transfers, the Auburn kid. We all know about Kenneth Walker coming over from Wake Forest. Moved over to the tight end spot. Yes, Connor Hayward, that's son of Ironhead Hayward, younger brother of Cam Hayward, Ohio State, Pittsburgh Steelers. This guy's in a much different package, though. He's about 6 foot, almost 240. Played all over the place in high school. He was quarterback, running back, receiver, safety, punter, really a jack of all trades type. 2018, Fran, really prolific player. He split some time with L.J. Scott. He was a one of 5 finalists for the Paul Hornung Award. He's a guy that just has always been a well-rounded, versatile player. I think in that 2018 season, he led the team in rushing touchdowns, carries, all-purpose yards, returns. So he's now a guy that kind of converted to a H-back, U-tight end, wing-back. He's not a true fullback, not a true Y tight end. Really unconventional player. Think Rock Cartwright, maybe Marcel Reese, Darrell Young, remember with the Washington football team. Jalen Samuels, the way he came out of NC State. Yep. Remember, he was 5'11", 220, looked like a running back. He went with the tight ends at the combine.
Yep.
Went to the Steelers and kind of jack of all trades guy. So Connor Hayward may not know where he's going to play yet, but he's a fun player, and I'm excited to watch him practice down there at Mobile.
And Connor Hayward, obviously, as you mentioned, the younger brother of Cam Hayward, who's the team that selected Jalen Samuels, that comp. Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll see if that's a connected dots pick down the line here. Let's go to Isaiah Likely from Coastal Carolina, one of the more dynamic athletes at the position in this class. He is a move player, but that just because he's better on the move does not mean that he can't block. All the same things we said about Tommy Tremble last year is like, look, he's the best blocker in the class. He does an outstanding job. Watch him on contact. But he's not an inline guy. Like Tommy Tremble was the guy you're putting with his hand in the dirt next to your left tackle or your right tackle and asking to block the ends. But you're asking to get up out in the move, block linebackers, block safeties, get him out in space on corners and nickels. That's what Likely does. Likely is he's really good in that area. They are very creative with their usage of him. But he's also, he's a high school wide receiver. He's 6'4", 240. So he's an undersized tight end who's got that athleticism. I wish he'd pull in some of the more high level of difficulty throws thrown his way. But I think when you look at just his skill set, I've compared him in the past to Gerald Everett, former second-round pick, who went down to the Senior Bowl, helped himself coming out of South Alabama. I think Likely is pretty similar to Gerald Everett in a lot of ways. Brevin Jordan, we've made that comp as well. Let's go now to the last one here from the tight end spot, Charlie Kohler from Iowa State.
Yeah, really quick. I feel like he's been at Iowa State forever there. A lot of tight ends coming out of Iowa State, but 6'6", 260, really good size. He can block in the run game, put his hand in the turf as a true Y tight end. But this guy catches everything, Fran. 242 career targets at Iowa State, 5 drops in his career. 5 drops and a crazy amount of targets, catches everything. A guy I've had no problem comparing to like a Todd Heap type of player. Yeah. I don't think he's running past anybody. I don't even think he's separating much, but he's got great range. He's got great length. He's going to pluck the ball away from his body. He may be like a Pat Freiermuth of this class, where that, he's not going to be an explosive receiver in the NFL, but he's going to have, 8 to 10 touchdowns in the red zone each season. I think Freiermuth is kind of on his way there with the Steelers.
Let's get into the offensive line. It felt like early this week, Tuesday morning, they just kind of rolled through a bunch of offensive line acceptances. And we'll start with one of my personal favorites, Zion Johnson from Boston College. He's been the left guard there 2 of the last 3 years. He played more left tackle in 2020. A little bit out of position out there on the perimeter. I like him more on the inside. I think when you look at Zion Johnson, he's athletic, he's competitive, he's pretty technically sound. A lot of traits to work with there as a future starting guard in the NFL. That position flex will help him. Certainly like him more on the interior. So to me, one of the top players, regardless of position, that's been announced so far by the Senior Bowl. I think he's in that running to be a top 50, top 60 type of selection. Let's go to Abe Lucas, the guy who's played a ton of ball out west for Washington State.
Yeah, 4-year starter at right tackle for Washington State. That's Abraham Lucas, known as Abe Lucas. 4-year starter, almost up to 3,000 snaps in his career. I think he'll actually eclipse that this weekend in whatever rivalry game he has over the weekend here. But Abe Lucas, don't forget about him. 6'7", 320, has played a lot of ball out there. I know Washington State, not the most conventional, team to go get players from the trenches from, but he's a really good player and he's experienced.
Let's go to a couple players from the SEC. We've got Darian Kennard from Kentucky, Ed Ingram from LSU. You've done a little bit more work on Ingram than I have, so I'll let you do Ed Ingram. I'll do Darian Kennard. This is a guy who's played mostly right tackle over the course of his career. A lot of people feel he might be a little bit better served sliding inside to guard. When he reaches the NFL, big physical mauler as a run blocker, a little bit heavy-footed as a pass protector. That will be the question. That's why some people feel he's better served inside. But for the offensive line coaches and teams that prefer bigger, stronger, stouter offensive linemen, they will be in on Darian Kennard. Big body kid who's played plenty of football out there for the Wildcats. Let's come to you for Ed Ingram down at LSU.
Yeah, Ed Ingram at LSU has been down there forever. He started 13 of 14 games as a true freshman back in 2017, sat out 2018 with a off-the-field incident. But this guy is massive. He's balanced. He's powerful, can really torque and finish defensive linemen, absorbs bull rushes and pass pro. He just has a huge frame. He kind of dares you to go through him, but he's got good awareness on stunts. He can kind of get up to linebackers and really get movement on them. Just reaches a little bit, overextends, plays outside his frame just a little bit, experienced at both guard spots, and played a lot of good football for him in 2019. In that championship run, he wasn't a mainstay, but if you remember, they had a lot of injuries and some moving parts at guard, center guard there. Filled in for Damian Lewis a couple games. So he's played some high-level football. He's an experienced player.
The only school with 2 offensive tackles in the game, so in the Senior Bowl so far. Central Michigan Chippewas. Fire up Chips. We're going to go with Bernard Raymond, who has gotten a lot of buzz. I'll let you do Bernard Raymond. I talked about Luke Gadecki earlier this week. He is the right tackle for the Chips. So this is a guy, I talked about him earlier in the week, so you can go back and check the full report there. But I was pretty impressed with this kid. He's a well-rounded player. He's got traits. He's not started a ton of games, so hasn't played a ton of ball. He's only been on campus for a few years. But this is a guy who is a converted high school tight end and D end, I believe, but athletic. He's got some strength. He's got some power to him. He's pretty technically sound. He loves to finish. He's a guy that grows on you the more you watch him. So Luke Gadecki at right tackle, feel like he might be better served moving inside as well when he gets to the NFL. Take us through Bernard Raymond, one of our buddy Dane Brugler's favorites in this class.
Yeah, the other side of the Central Michigan offensive line, the left tackle, after converting from tight end, kind of an undersized guy at about 6'6", 300 pounds, just really struggles to fill out his lower half, being that converted tight end and a taller prospect. I don't think I see a lot of power in his game, but he's really athletic. He's balanced, great body control, can really latch and kind of mirror rushers. He's rarely on the ground. He can do everything athletically you want from a tackle, whether it's reach blocks or playing out on the perimeter. I think he's a little bit more like a Brian O'Neill out of Pittsburgh, also a tight end convert, second-round pick to the Minnesota Vikings.
Yep.
High side comp. Could he be Joe Staley, who is also a tight end to tackle convert, coincidentally, at Central Michigan, maybe like a Lane Johnson, as you've kind of compared him to. So he's really athletic, obviously has some issues with his body, filling out that lower half, but he's still developing, still ascending. So we'll see where he goes.
All right, let's get to a couple more offensive linemen here. Andrew Stuber from Michigan, Matt Roletzko from North Dakota at the FCS level. I've studied both of these guys. I think when you look at Stuber, he's got some positional versatility. He can get off a little bit in terms of getting off the ball in the run game. Needs to get a little bit better in pass protection. That's really the big issue for him at this point. Then Matt Roletzko from North Dakota, a guy who was highlighted in that Bruce Feldman piece a couple of weeks ago. 6'7", 300 pounds. Needs to get stronger, but he's athletic. He gets out of his stance pretty well. I actually studied him this morning, Ben, as we're recording this, so I've done a couple games on him. He's an impressive mover, and he can get up to the second level. Just needs to get a little bit more consistent with his hands, and he needs to get stronger. He's going to need time, some seasoning there on the back end of an NFL roster. But a couple tackles there to round things out for the offensive line.
Yeah, a couple good players there. And let's move over to the linebackers here. So Damone Clark at LSU, really good size at 6'3", 245. Reminds me a lot of Kelvin Shepard, who is a LSU linebacker about 10 years earlier, went in the third round to the Buffalo Bills, if I'm not mistaken. I think Damone Clark is right in that back end of day 2 kind of category right now. Has played a lot of good football, occasionally some eye violations. I'm really wondering what his football IQ is, but he's long, he's athletic, he's strong. He's shown up on the freak list, has worn that patented number 18 for LSU, showing the leadership and the captain of the defense, core special teamer throughout his career as well. And he's played some high-level football. You know, he's played on that championship team in 2019, had 3 starts, one of them in the championship game against Georgia, that SEC championship game. So he's played some high-level football. And Fran, you play linebacker in the SEC for 3-4 years, especially as a 19-year-old as he did. He's got some bad tape out there. You know, you learn, through experience out there in the SEC. So experienced players are going to have some bad games. They're going to have some bad snaps. Don't kill them for it, especially linebackers. It's tough out there in the SEC having to tackle all those athletic running backs and slot receivers out there. So Damone Clark, really experienced.
You can see that with a number of positions. Offensive line is certainly one of the 4-year starters. When you go back and look at their early tape, it's going to be ugly. You're going to take your lumps if you're out there earlier, especially in the SEC. A couple DBs, let's get through. Damari Mathis from Pitt. I know you just studied him yesterday. Impressive player. Joshua Thompson, kind of a high upside outside corner. He's got some traits to work with, some special teams background as well. But I know you studied Damari Mathis.
Yeah, Damari Mathis is a really fun player because he's a guy that's tough in the flat and in run support, being 5'10", about 205. He's got good size, but he can play the ball down the field and really survive on an island, which Narduzzi's cover 4 scheme plays a lot of quarters, which means he's kind of fending for himself. He doesn't have a whole lot of safety help. Everything converts to man after about 6-7 yards in the route. He plays the ball down the field exceptionally well. Obviously, he's had to defend guys like Clemson and North Carolina the past 3-4 years in the high-powered offense of Sam Howell and Trevor Lawrence, but he's got ball skills. I actually think he may be a convert to be like a nickel safety. Just his ability to play the run, his good size. It's a little stiff-hipped at times. But he wins with his toughness in the route, on the release points, at the catch point. Really tough player in Damari Mathis.
I mean, that's what Avonte Maddox was an outside corner through and through for them. And it's funny, he was actually a player too. He had a lot of bad tape early in his career. Avonte did.
I remember I did an Avonte game. They did Oklahoma State. They showed up to Heinz Field, Oklahoma State, and Mason Rudolph and James Washington hung like 40-50 on him. Yeah. And I was like, I don't think Avonte can play corner in this league. Next thing you know, you convert him to nickel, and he just enjoyed a brand new contract this past week as one of the top slot defenders in the NFL.
That's it. So we'll keep an eye here on Maddox.
What did Maddox weigh coming out of Pitt? You know,
he was a little bit lighter. He wasn't quite as big. Yeah, he was definitely on the smaller side.
5'9", 185. Yeah, Damari Mathis more in the 5'10", 205 category. Different type of players, but Avonte running 4.39 obviously helped him.
No doubt. All right, let's get to this weekend in college football. Rivalry weekend. We were talking the other day how hard that is to say consistently in the first round. A rivalry weekend here in college football. A bunch of games Thursday, a bunch of games Friday, a bunch of games Saturday. So I'm going to personally try and stick to the Saturday tape. That way, if you're listening to this on Friday, you're not hearing something that's completely timed out. But I'll tell you what, big game here, Saturday in the Big Ten, Ohio State, Michigan. I learned my lesson. I'm not going to pick against Ohio State here this week after I picked Michigan State a week ago, Ben. But Ohio State, along the offensive line, Nicholas Petit-Frere is a guy that you've been hyping up. I know Dane is very high on him as well at offensive tackle. Huge matchup for him going up against this Michigan defensive front. A couple pass rushers there. Aiden Hutchinson, we've talked about him. You may be aware of him. Maybe one of the top prospects, regardless of position in the country. And then David Ojabo, another high-rising player, has not played a ton of football, but has been extremely productive. Petit-Frere is going to see both of these guys in this game, regardless of which he's not getting any plays off against both these guys.
Well, I'm going to stick to the Conference USA matchups this weekend, Fran. And two, I just want to hit on really fast. Undefeated UTSA, really fun team to watch. They're on the road against North Texas. North Texas, a lot of good defenders. You got KD Davis at linebacker. You have to go up against Sincere McCormick at running back. But the other matchup in the Conference USA I want to watch at 3:30 on the CBS Sports Network, that's Western Kentucky at Marshall. That's Western Kentucky quarterback Bailey Zappi against Marshall's defense. And they have two really good ball-hawking corners out there. One of them, Stephen Gilmore. Yes, the younger brother of Stephon Gilmore, now with the Carolina Panthers, if I'm not mistaken, going over from the Patriots, former Defensive Player of the Year. And the other side, Micah Abraham, who's an absolute ball hawk at 6'2", 180 with really good length. So Bailey Zappi has a pretty prolific season going on here. I don't know if you guys are paying attention. 48 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 4,600 yards passing, over 70% completions. I believe he's on his way to the Senior Bowl, if I'm not mistaken, Fran. Did we talk about him last week?
No, he's not. Or Bailey Zappi is. Yes, we did.
Yeah, Bailey Zappi, yes.
Bailey Zappi is heading over.
He's on the road this week. I think they're first in their division in Conference USA, opposite UTSA, who's undefeated in the other division. We'll see if they have a showdown in the conference championship game, if they even have a conference championship game. I'm blanking right now. But Bailey Zappi, 3:30 against Marshall, CBS Sports Network.
Everybody's got a conference championship game now, except for Notre Dame. They're the only team they don't have the conference title game. Let's go to Most Gain. Who's a player that could really help himself with a strong performance this week? And I'm going to go for a twofer here. How about that South Carolina defensive front? And we talk about Kingsley Enagbare, Jordan Strong, the two guys, draft eligible seniors on either side, going up against Clemson. Now, Clemson's having a down year, but I'm telling you, you have that rivalry game, and I don't want to give too much away, but potential upset alert here for South Carolina going up against Clemson. South Carolina picking up a little steam here on the back end of the season. Clemson a little bit down. We'll see. This is a big opportunity here for that South Carolina defensive line to eat.
And one of my favorite matchups at the end of every college football season, you just highlighted one of them. I believe that's the Poinsettia game or I don't care.
I'm not throwing you the life.
South Carolina, Clemson. I've done that game a couple times for ESPN. But anyways, how about the United We Stand, Divided We Fall game? That's right. The big battle in Kentucky. Louisville, Kentucky rivals they face at the end of every season. Fran, Louisville's rolling right now. 41-3 against Syracuse, hung a 60 burger on Duke last week. They're playing some really good ball. They played Ole Miss at the SEC in the season opener. They weren't the same team. Playing another SEC team this week in Kentucky. Look on the back end. 2 big-time transfers at safety. Quintarian Cole, Kendrick Duncan out there for Louisville. They're having a great season. In kind of a murky year for Louisville. They're coming out on the other side right now, playing some good football. But I think Cole and Duncan have a big performance against Will Levis and Mark Stutz and some of those SEC receivers like Wandale Robinson. This is a huge game for their NFL stock. So both transfers this year, and Cole and Duncan playing good football. Another SEC matchup. When we go to the tape in the offseason, Fran, Louisville, SEC games, we're going to go right to that. Ole Miss, Kentucky. Let's finish strong here.
I'm going to be honest. I haven't done a deep dive yet on Malik Cunningham, the quarterback for Louisville, but that guy is dynamic. Like, he is one of the most explosive playmakers in college football at the quarterback position. Really, regardless of position, he's worth the price of admission alone if you're going to watch this game. So keep an eye on Malik Cunningham, the quarterback there for the Cardinals. Let's go to our comparison chat. An NFL comp to profile a player picking this week. I almost removed this category this week just because we had covered so many names, but I know how much you love doing player comps, so I had to leave it in there. I'll let you go first.
All right, so I had mentioned a fun one early in the week. Make sure you watch our recap episode or listen to our recap episode earlier. I threw out John Ridgeway, going from Arkansas, the Illinois State transfer, headed to the Senior Bowl. He reminded me a lot of Brett Kiesel as a throwback. Yep. One other fun name, not getting a lot of love, in my opinion, that Georgia defense, Georgia front seven. We talked Jordan Davis and all those linebackers. Devontae Wyatt is a really good player, Fran. And I think he reminds me a lot of Jarrell Casey. Coming out of USC, one of the more underrated players in the NFL over the last 8 to 10 years. He just retired after a quick stint with the Broncos, after really good football with the Titans. 300-pounder, can play up and down the line, good pass rusher, kind of a dancing panda type. Devontae Wyatt, Jarrell Casey. Book it here first.
Do you like him more or less? They're talking about senior defensive tackles. Do you like him more or less than Haskell Garrett?
I think they're a little bit different type of player. I think Haskell is a little bit tougher at the point of attack, kind of a thicker frame, I think, through the hips and whatnot. I think Devontae Wyatt's a little heavier up top and then gets kind of skinny in the legs there, allows him to be a little bit more quick-footed, can kind of shoot into gaps and get upfield a little bit faster, rushing the passer. But two really strong players. I know you have a pretty interesting comp for Haskell Garrett right now. I have a couple names to match you on. Who do you got?
So I really like Haskell Garrett, and I compared him to Christian Covington, who, if you're like an NFL fan, you're like, oh, well, wow, okay, the journeyman backup defensive tackle, Christian Covington. I really liked Christian Covington coming out of Rice, and that was number one. Number two, he's been really banged up with injuries. He's actually playing some pretty good ball right now, and over the last couple of years, he's been really good off the bench for the teams that he has played for. And I think when you look at Covington, his ability to disrupt inside, he's got some positional versatility as both a shade and a three-tech. Probably better served at three tech. That's exactly how I view Haskell Garrett. Better served at three. He can slide inside if you need him to, but I think he's better served over the guard. I think this guy's really disruptive. He's athletic. He's compact. He competes well. A lot of the things you said about him and comparing him to Wyatt. Haskell Garrett's one of the more underrated players in the country, in my opinion. There's not enough people talking about him in this defensive tackle group overall.
Yeah, so my comparison is in a similar vein that it may not excite a lot of NFL fans or college fans or fans of Haskell Garrett, but this guy played at Texas, was a third-round pick, played 12 years in the NFL for 5 different teams. Just was never that sexy on your fantasy team type of defensive lineman. That's Corey Redding. If you remember, he was a third-round pick, played a lot for the Lions. Yep. Yeah, but he kept getting jobs because he's one of those hired gun types that could play D-tackle. He could slide out at the end. He was 6'3", about 310, same type of body type as Haskell Garrett, reliable run defender. It's one of these guys that just isn't super sexy, flashy, explosive, twitchy, to really be a double-digit sack guy, but a 3-down player that can play up and down the line. I think Corey Redding and Haskell Garrett, they're your pros type. So I think third round, he was picked 66, early third round. I think that's kind of Haskell Garrett country.
I like it. He's one of my favorite players that's like not talked about enough in this class for
really
sure.
Good player.
let's wrap things up with our mock draft roundup. And this week we're going to go over to the Draft Network. Keith Sanchez putting out a mock draft over at TDN. And first question, most surprising pick in the top 15, Ben? We're seeing a lot of consensus here with who's going where. What was your biggest shock there in the top 15?
But Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa, meteoric rise this year, up into the first round, now into the top 10, 9th overall to the Atlanta Falcons. And I think they can use some more offensive line juice, obviously. They're trying to work in Jalen Mayfield from last year. They just went to the offensive line well in the first round 2 years ago, taking Caleb McGarry and Chris Lindstrom. They need an upgrade at center. Jake Matthews at left tackle has some question marks. So the Falcons, 9th overall, Trevor Penning. Surprising for a number of reasons, but I really like Penning, and I think that's going to be a good pick. That's the highest I've seen him taken, and the Falcons once again going to the offensive line well, as opposed to maybe getting that Matt Ryan successor at quarterback.
They took Jake Matthews in the first round a few years ago, and you're like, okay, like Jake Matthews hasn't turned into an elite tackle, but he's a solid starter on the left side. Like, would it be surprising if Penning turned into like that level of player? I think you and I both like him to be a little bit better than that, but I don't think we look at Penning as like an elite player. But look, that they need solid offensive line play, and you could do a lot worse than Trevor Penning.
In 11 weeks into the season, we could probably spend an entire podcast talking about the Kyle Pitts pick and whether it was worth it, and the franchise direction, and Matt Ryan getting old, obviously some issues in the trenches, issues on defense. Did they add some nice tints and rims to a car that the engine really is kind of dying? Interesting conversation if the Kyle Pitts pick was really worth it at number 4 overall.
All right, well, I'm going to go to the number 1 pick in this mock draft. That was my most surprising because Aiden Hutchinson, number 1 overall, ahead of Kayvon Thibodeau to the Detroit Lions. Ben, we were talking about Hutchinson in the last segment. This is a guy that is really disruptive and has been outstanding this year for Michigan. And he's been a 3-year starter. He was banged up last year, got hurt after the third game of the 2020 season. So didn't play a ton as a junior, has come on like gangbusters here this year. He plays the run, he plays the pass, he gets after it in pursuit, can line up inside, outside, both sides of the field. Hutchinson's a really good player, but is he the number 1 pick? That would be surprising. I don't know that that's out there often. This one was a very big surprise for me as soon as I opened up this mock draft.
Yeah, that was definitely a pleasant surprise to see at number 1 overall there. Haven't seen that a whole lot, but I love throwing it out there and kind of mixing up the consensus.
That's it. Let's shake it up. Let's shake it up a little bit. We're going to get into some other big picture discussions, but let's get into 3 Eagles picks here in the top 16. We're going to go first one here, 9th overall, the first pick for the Eagles from the Miami Dolphins. This is wide receiver Chris Olave. Here's the blurb here from Keith. The Jalen Hurts project looks like it is working in Philadelphia. In order to continue to help his progression, they draft the most complete wide receiver in this year's draft in Chris Olave. In college, we've seen the best versions of Hurts when he was surrounded by elite wide receiver talents, and the Eagles need to replicate that to get the most out of their young quarterback. So Ben, thoughts on Chris Olave at number 9? This is a guy that you and I both love. I love Chris Olave. This is a guy that can stretch the field. He's technically savvy. He can separate. He can track the ball. He can win after the catch. He does a lot for a defense. It would be interesting, or he does a lot for an offense. It would be interesting to see the Eagles spend 3 first round picks in 3 years at the position. But Olave he's a dynamic talent. He's really, really fun to watch.
He's obviously has some explosive speed. He's got good size at about 6'2". He's good at the catch point, good route runner. He can play a variety of positions. I think he could survive as being an X in the NFL, but has the savviness to play some Z and some F and some over the middle stuff as well. Would be a great complement to some of the stable weapons they have with Dallas Goedert and Miles Sanders, and obviously the former Heisman Trophy winner,
Devontae Smith.
I don't know why I couldn't think of his name right there.
It's early.
But anyways, yeah, Chris Olave. Yeah, would love to add him, and I think any receiver room would love to add Chris Olave. It's just weighing what the other needs are with your teams.
All right, let's get to a couple picks later. 11 overall, cornerback Andrew Booth, and this would be the Eagles pick here with the 11th overall selection. Here's the blurb from Keith. The Eagles need team speed on both sides of the ball. With this pick, they go with Andrew Booth, a quick twitch, explosive athlete that plays with a passion for the game that jumps out to you on film. Booth combined with veteran Darius Slay will give the Eagles one of the most athletic cornerback tandems in the league. So, Ben, interested to get your thoughts on Andrew Booth. Do you view him as that kind of like athletic specimen when you watch him on film? I do love Andrew Booth. I'm a big fan of the way he plays the ball in the air. I like his competitiveness downhill. Do you feel like that athleticism is the trait that kind of sets him apart from some of the other corners in this group?
I feel like that's not only what sets him apart, that's really what he hangs his hat on and how he has to make his money is just being a really loose, kind of athletic, long ball hawking player. That's why I love him kind of in that side saddle with his eyes in the backfield, to kind of jump routes, even if it's not his guy. We've seen a number of kind of corner, jump in the slot and jump in seam routes. He's rangy, his ball skills, makes a lot of incredible catches on the ball. Just a little bit raw with some press man stuff. With Brent Venables, a lot of people don't realize primarily zone coverage out there. And he's playing less and less press man, even on third downs. And I think a guy like Andrew Booth, we're seeing a lot more of zone, eyes in the backfield in the NFL, a lot of cover 4 out there where you're kind of just press bailing. No help over the top. He's a guy that can survive on an island, play the ball down the field, really athletic, rangy, loose. A lot of traits to like.
I like it. Well, let's get to our last one here. 16 overall. This is the pick from the Indianapolis Colts. And the selection here, offensive tackle Darian Kinnard, who was just announced for the Senior Bowl. We talked about him earlier in the show. With this pick, the Eagles select Darian Kinnard, a multi-year starter that has played against some of the best edge rushers college football has to offer. Kinnard has great feet and plays with physicality to help continue the Eagles' dominance in the run game. So I think from that aspect, Ben, that certainly makes sense. You know, you look at the way the Eagles have run the ball over the last month. Hey, let's continue to supply there. I would never rule out offensive line for this team. We know how much they value the trenches on both sides of the line. Kinnard definitely gives them that kind of presence. That said, certainly one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. They've added some young players to that group. So thoughts on Darian Kinnard? I guess just almost like looking at it in a vacuum. Like, what are your thoughts on Kinnard there in the middle of round one?
I think that's more than an appropriate spot, but I'm sliding him into guard all day long. It reminds me a ton of former first-round pick Cody Ford, who was a tackle at Oklahoma. Also big, mauler, heavy-legged, immediately slid into guard with the Buffalo Bills and has been a mainstay right guard since he arrived in the league. Kinnard, though, a little issue in space, a little issue with some foot quickness. His pad level struggles at time out there, wide hands. I haven't loved his 2021 tape, especially since Kentucky's played really well for most of the season. But I think sliding him into guard can really tap into just his size, strength, power, and all that natural ability because, Fran, he is massive and he's nasty and he wants to finish guys. Not a whole lot different than the way Landon Dickerson kind of played with his kind of glass-eating style out there, too. Landon, a guy that also played some tackle in his career, especially at Florida State, goes to Alabama, more of an interior guy. I think Kinnard's going to be an interior guy, but I'm excited for him to show up to Mobile and maybe flash a little bit of that versatility that we really haven't seen at Kentucky.
And I do feel like you're giving us an honest assessment because you are like the most pro Kentucky football athletics person I've seen since like Ashley Judd. So I will take that word as bond. Good stuff there.
And I was big on Kinnard through the past couple of years too. So I'm more than willing to say I loved him in 2019, 2020, 2021 tape hasn't really lived up to those expectations. So prove me wrong. All
right, I like it. Well, let's get to a couple just big picture items before we wrap this up. Thanksgiving week. All right, so I want to go pick that you'd be most thankful for if you were a fan of that team and that made the selection. For me, it would be the Pittsburgh Steelers getting Kenny Pickett at number 23, a guy that you can slide in and say, all right, we're gonna put him in and start him. Homegrown kid, obviously playing there at Heinz Field. Let's slide him in and take over for Ben Roethlisberger and kind of honestly play similarly offensively the way that we've been trying to play with Big Ben. Maybe just now, obviously with a guy that's got a little bit more juice from where he's at right now from an athletic standpoint, arm talent standpoint. So Kenny Pickett at 23 to the Steelers, I think they'd be fairly happy with that acquisition.
Well, I think Tennessee Titans fans would be super excited to see Nakobe Dean go 7th to the Giants, Brandon Smith go 29th to the Ravens, and Devin Lloyd out of Utah falling to 31st overall to the Tennessee Titans. I think that would be an absolute steal for Titans fans. They can use an off-ball linebacker, a mainstay. I think Devin Lloyd would be a great pick there. And how about the 31st and 32nd picks in his mock, friend? The Tennessee Titans and Arizona Cardinals. I don't know if that's just based on record right now.
Yeah, I think it's based off record.
That'd be a fun Super Bowl matchup there. The Cliff Kingsbury going against Mike Vrabel out there. We'll see if they can survive without Derrick Henry. But
we're doing
Devin
over-unders. As I say, we're doing over-unders in the next segment with Ross, but 32.5. I'm going to set that over 32.5. So basically, first round or not, Devin Lloyd. Round one in April? Or
yes,
after?
round one all day long. I think he's ascending every week. He's checking every box. He's going to keep rising. I think it's interesting to see no Toyo, no Christian Harris, no Quay Walker, no Tyndall, no some of those other guys that are really rising on boards. But Devin Lloyd, linebacker 3 in his positional rankings here in this mock draft, falling to 31 overall. Devin Lloyd, I'm going to say right now, I think he reminds me a lot of Fred Warner.
Whoa,
and their body types,
praise.
their long legs, their high cut, their range, their ball skills, their instincts, they're getting off blocks. Fred Warner, maybe the best linebacker in the NFL right now. I think he's certainly paid like it. Devin Lloyd, 31st. I think he can even be a top end of the first round type of player.
All right, last question. And this is, I'm going to keep with the Thanksgiving theme here, okay?
Yep.
What's the selection that's like eating that third slice of apple pie when you should have only had one? Completely unnecessary, but still delicious, and you still love it. So the pick in the first round here that you're just completely not needed at all, but you're like, yeah, I still kind of like this. So for me, it was the Buffalo Bills at 21 overall, taking Purdue pass rusher George Karlaftis. I think that's outstanding value at 21 overall. But the Bills just took Greg Rousseau and Boogie Basham last year. They took A.J. Epinesa in the second round a year before. How many young pass rushers does this team need? Guys that have that inside-outside versatility that can push the pocket. Karlaftis absolutely is a fit. It would just be like an embarrassment of riches along the defensive front there. What would be one for you?
Well, I think just the unnecessary slice of pie here is David Ojabo going to New England Patriots, which is also known as Michigan Wolverines East, apparently, because they took Josh Uche, 2 years ago. They took Cameron McGrone last year. They already have Chase Winovich out there. Michael Owenu is playing a lot of offensive line for them. Tons of Jim Harbaugh disciples out there with Bill Belichick, adding another Michigan front seven player to this front seven in New England. We have too many out there, right? These Ohio State guys are getting a little bit nervous in that locker room over there. Too many Michigan Wolverines with the Patriots. I know Brady's not there anymore. There's not a quota to meet Bill. It's okay. Look elsewhere. Go get some Alabama guys.
I do wonder if the connection, obviously there's a Harbaugh connection, but I wonder if it's a Don Brown connection, because Don Brown, remember, came up in high school football in the New England area. We know that Bill Belichick obviously will reach out to coaches at all levels, picking their brain. Don Brown does great defensive things, just got hired as the new head coach at UMass. So keep an eye out on that pipeline. He was just with the University of Arizona. So we'll see if any Wildcats end up in New England this offseason. But certainly a pipeline that can continue there with David Ojabo heading to the Patriots. Well, Ben, I think we covered like 80 players in this segment, so I'll let you go eat some turkey, and we'll talk next week right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand.
Hey, Eagles fans, get ready for the game each Sunday with an exclusive look at Eagles pregame warm-ups brought to you live each week when you join myself, Amy Campbell, and Eagles insider Dave Spadaro on the Kickoff Show presented by Exalta. We provide Eagles-focused analysis, late-breaking news, and the team perspective that you cannot get anywhere else. The Kickoff Show presented by Exalta can be seen live 50 minutes before kickoff on PhiladelphiaEagles.com, the Eagles mobile app, and the team's social media channels.
Now it's time for Pick Six.
All right, we're here to wrap up the show once again for Pick Six, my friend Ross Tucker. And Ross, we split last week, which means we are still tied up. You picked Utah over Oregon smartly. I picked Alec Pierce over Reggie Roberson in the SMU Cincinnati game. We both missed on our upsets, which means, like I said, we are still tied up, and we are getting close here to the end of the season, which means every single one of these picks mean a whole lot, man.
What are the odds, by the way, with we do 6 every week that we'd be exactly tied? It's pretty awesome, actually.
Yeah, this is 2 weeks or 2 years in a row, because it was like this last year as well. We went right down to the wire.
How far did we go? I forget. Did we go through the bowls? I can't remember when we stopped.
I think we went through the bowls. Yeah, I think we went, and I think we actually even did like different props through the national title game. So we still got a few weeks here, but right. It's still very, very tight. Let's get to our pick'ems here, and we're going to go to the Kentucky-Louisville game, a game that Ben brought up earlier here in the show. Straight pick'em. Who do you like here in the battle in the bluegrass?
I'm going to go Louisville.
Nice.
Because I did their game against Clemson. I was really impressed by Malik Cunningham.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy is electric. He really is like a poor man's Lamar Jackson. That's who he reminds me of. And they just haven't been able to close out some of these close games. I think they win this game. But honestly, this could go either way. But I'm gonna put my faith in Cunningham, and I'll take the Cardinals.
I'll go Kentucky here. I like a lot of the pieces on that offense. I think they've got some defensive talent as well. A couple guys going to the Senior Bowl in Corker and Pascal. I think when you look at that offense with Wan'Dale Robinson, we talked about him earlier. I think when you look at this offense, what they can do, I will put my faith in that side of the football here, getting the win against UL. Let's go to the next one here. Back to the Big Ten. Michigan State and Penn State. Who do you like here in this one?
I'm going to go Michigan State. I believe that they will bounce back from an embarrassing loss to Ohio State. I think they recognize they've had a heck of a good year, and they want to be 10-2. Big difference, 10-2. You beat Michigan, you beat Penn State, as opposed to 9-3. Get a win for the seniors on Senior Day up there in East Lansing. I like Michigan State. Penn State still isn't really playing that great. They've got some O-line issues now. I like the Spartans.
What about with the contract extension for James Franklin? You feel like that murkiness now that was kind of in the background, that noise maybe kind of settles in, and then the team settles in, or you feel like very little impact there?
I would say very little impact. I don't think that has much of a factor when those guys are out there inside the white lines in front of 80,000 people.
That said, I'm going Michigan State as well for all the reasons that you said. I was interested to see which way you would go there, obviously knowing that Penn State program as well as you do. Let's now go to the next one. An either or. We're going to go the over-under next. This one was an interesting one. So I'm going to go freshman quarterback Caleb Williams for Oklahoma. 3.5 total touchdowns, rushing, receiving, or throwing here for Williams against their arch rival, Oklahoma State, the in-state rival. What do you like here? The over or under there for Caleb Williams? Because he's been feast or famine this season.
Yeah, I'm going to go under. I'm going to go famine. I like Oklahoma State's defense. Look, you never know if Caleb Williams will get benched, but Oklahoma State's defense been one of the best in the Big 12 in a long time. It feels like they're good on that side of the ball. My guy Jim Knowles, former Cornell head coach, doing a nice job with that team. I think Oklahoma State seems like they never win this game. They never get to the Big 12 championship. They never get to the college football playoff. They get a real opportunity. I think they're going to make the most of it. I'll go under 3.5.
3.5. It was because at first I was initially going to go 2.5, and I was like, oh, that's a little low. 3.5 makes it a very tough decision. I had gone back and forth on this. Oklahoma State absolutely is playing well on defense, but man, I hate to bet against Lincoln Riley. I know that it's been kind of ugly for Oklahoma this year. I watched that whole game last week against Iowa State. They squeak out a win out there. Obviously, that's a very senior-laden defensive group. I'm going to go over here, though, because I want to try and see if I can create some separation from you. I'm going to put a lot of faith in the talent there of Caleb Williams. Obviously, they've got a lot of talent across the entire scope of that offense. I will take the over there on 3.5 total touchdowns for the freshman phenom, Caleb Williams. Let's now go to our either or. We're looking at a couple games here. One out west, one in the Big Ten. Who's got the bigger margin of victory? The Oregon Ducks over Oregon State, or Wisconsin over Minnesota? Which team do you have more faith in, the Ducks or the Badgers?
I'm going to go Ducks. I'm a little concerned about the whole college football playoff and them losing to Utah and there being a letdown there. But I'm going to go Ducks, and I'm going to believe that they bounce back. They still have a lot of their goals in front of them for this season. And I think Wisconsin-Minnesota is going to be a battle. I think that's going to be a battle. Not that Oregon State won't be, but I'll go with the Ducks. I think there's more of a talent disparity between Oregon and Oregon State than there is between Wisconsin and Minnesota.
Dude, I'm going to go with this Wisconsin running back, Braylon Allen. Maybe I'm putting too much faith in this freshman class. I took the over on Caleb Williams in the last category. I'm going to go Braylon Allen and just how dominant he's been on the ground. This Wisconsin offense really starting to hum right now, going up against Minnesota. I took Oregon last week in that Utah game. I wrongfully placed my faith in the Ducks, so maybe I'm a little spurned from that one, but I will go Wisconsin Badgers here. So we're separate here on 3 of our first 4 picks. So we should get some separation competition here next week. Let's now go to the game, the Ohio State-Michigan battle. Obviously, look, it's a lot of people feel like Ohio State going to win this one. So I didn't want to go straight pick them. I felt like that would be too easy for you, that you would definitely go Buckeyes. So my thought process here, Garrett Wilson, one of the star receivers for Ohio State, his yards per catch here in this game, or the Ohio State margin of victory over Michigan. Who do you like here, this one?
I like Garrett Wilson, yards per catch. Yep. I mean, there's some chance Michigan wins. I think Michigan has an even better chance to keep it close. And I think Garrett Wilson's yards per catch is over 10. So I'm going to go with Michigan. Michigan's got a good formula to go against Ohio State. They got two awesome DNs. They can run the ball very well. They're going to play keep away from C.J. Stroud and those receivers. So Garrett Wilson yards per catch for sure.
That's why I usually try and get you on those margin of victories, because sometimes you go, you never know. It could be the upset. It's always interesting to see which way you go there. I also will go with Garrett Wilson here in this one. Let's go with the upset special. One big upset to win. Who do you like here this week? A crazy week, obviously, rivalry weekend here in college football.
North Texas.
Oh,
I am going with the Mean Green to end UTSA's undefeated season. They're 11-0, 7-0 in Conference USA. They're in the West Side. I think North Texas gets it done. That's a lot of games to win. North Texas has won 4 in a row, by the way. North Texas is playing much better, and I just think it's hard to go undefeated. Sorry, UTSA, but it's hard to go undefeated. I'm going North Texas.
Wow. I did not see that one coming from you at this point. I went back and forth on this one, man. And South Carolina, they've won 2 of 3. They beat Florida a couple weeks ago. They beat Auburn last week. They had a tough loss, 3-point loss to Mizzou a couple weeks ago. They've got Clemson this week. Big rivalry game in state. This is their chance, right? If they're going to beat Clemson in recent memory, this feels like the opportunity here for the Gamecocks. You like what Shane Beamer has done so far this year. I know it's been a little bit up and down, but they've won 2 of 3. Let's go South Carolina here for my upset over the Clemson Tigers. We'll see if either of us are able to pull away. We went separate here on 4 of the first 5 picks, and then I think both these upsets have a shot here, Ross. We'll see which one of us comes out on top.
Yeah, I mean, South Carolina's playing better. Clemson took care of business against Wake Forest. That was pretty impressive to me. So that's why I couldn't do that.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting game. Ross, enjoy some turkey. I know you will. I know you'll have a few daddy sodas as well over the course of the next few days. Enjoy the holiday. Happy Thanksgiving to you and you guys.
Likewise, Fran, and likewise to all the listeners. Love you guys.
So great stuff this week from Ben Fennell and Ross Tucker. Obviously, we will be back next week here breaking down everything we see in Rivalry Weekend. We're going to have Dane Brugler back on the show early next week. Excited to catch back up with him and talk through some of the things that he's taken away from these last couple of weeks in college football. We're always breaking it down right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand. When the clock hits all zeros, the game might be over, but the action is not. Join us for the post-game show presented by Rico for instant reaction. Watch live as Coach Nick Sirianni and Eagles players come to the podium and meet with the media. We will make sure you do not miss a word. Myself, Ike Reese, and Gabriella DiGiovanni will also break down the game live at the desk and hear from Eagles insider Dave Spadaro to get his thoughts. The post-game show presented by Rico can be seen on PhiladelphiaEagles.com, the Eagles mobile app, and the team's social media channels.